Imagine it's match point and you're hitting the last shot to win the game. You bounce the ball, toss it, and it went wide by a few inches. Now it's up to your second serve. You're a little tense, but you bounce the ball again, you toss it, and it went wide again. Now imagine all you had to do was move your foot by a couple of inches, and you could hit an ace to win the game. Your stance plays a critical role in your serve. It can determine how much you turn away and to the ball. It can determine how high you jump off the ground, how stable you are through the serve, and ultimately how much racket head speed you can develop. In this video, we'll discover which stance gives you the most power, accuracy, consistency, and variation, and we'll help you decide which one is the best for you. Let's go. Today's video is brought to you by RacquetFlex VIP Coaching. We've gotten so many positive comments from you guys in our YouTube videos, but this is just the tip of the iceberg to what we can do to transform your tennis game. If you want us to personally analyze your stroke and give you targeted drills to help eliminate those bad habits and turn your stroke into a weapon, then go check out our new VIP coaching page down in the description below. Now back to the regularly scheduled video. First, align your front foot. A common teaching is to point the front foot at the net pole, but this might cause problems in limiting how much you can rotate your body back. What you'll see in the most high-level servers is they'll actually have their feet closer to parallel to the baseline, about 10 to 15 degrees off. Now set your back foot about shoulder width apart and point it in the direction that's parallel to the baseline. To initiate your motion, you'll want to either start leaned over at the waist or more upright with the weight on the back leg. As you begin initiating your motion though, you'll want to shift your weight equally onto the balls of your feet and start your knee bend. Narrow platform. For this stance, both feet should be flat on the ground. This conservative starting stance suits the compact and quick nature of the narrow platform stance. As you initiate your backswing, you want to simultaneously bend both legs and shift your weight forward. From this stance, you can now explode yourself into the air. The starting stance for pinpoint servers varies from player to player, but generally, they will start with most of their weight on the back foot. Some players start with their back foot behind and they'll step forward to align their feet. This stance will help you naturally step into a more closed stance at the end of the knee bend. Other players will start with their feet spaced apart and they'll bring the back foot closer to the baseline. This stance is the most commonly used and most taught because it allows you to naturally shift your weight forward because you're dragging your back foot toward your front foot. Your front foot will be the same as other stances, about 10 to 15 degrees from the baseline. Lastly, as you start your toss, you'll want to begin bending your front leg and bring the back foot forward. So which one allows for the most power? To answer this question, we first have to understand what's responsible for generating racket head speed. There are three main factors that contribute to generating racket head speed: how much force you can generate through your leg drive, how effectively you transfer these forces into the trunk and ultimately into the racket head speed, and how much distance you allow your racket to travel in the forward swing. Each stance has its own limitations and advantages, and it has different ways of accelerating the racket head. Let's start with the first factor, starting from the ground and up. Which stance allows for the most powerful leg drive? There are two types of forces that you generate with leg drive that contributes to power on your serve. The first is horizontal force that allows you to launch your weight into the ball and the court. The second is vertical force, which is responsible for driving your trunk and shoulders up while driving your racket down into the racket drop. Vertical force will also raise your contact point so that you can hit more powerfully consistently. According to a study done by Bruce Elliott and Graham Wood, a narrow stance produces greater levels of vertical force during the leg drive, while a wider stance produces greater levels of horizontal force. Supposedly, the platform stance is better suited for serve and volley style players because launching further in the court will help you get to the net faster, while the pinpoint stance produces higher contact points, allowing for more power and consistency. But as always, it's a little bit more complex than that. You'll always see players with pinpoint stances who don't launch quite as high as platformers. In fact, players like Federer, Agassi, and Sampras are known for their wider stances but still have some of the highest launching heights in the game. With the pinpoint stance, most of the weight is shifted onto the front leg as the back leg begins to open up. The less weight your back leg has on it, the less your back leg will help in driving your body upward. In some cases, players will move their back foot forward onto their toes. This completely inhibits them from using the back leg to push, and by this point, the back leg is merely serving to balance the player through the leg drive. On the other hand, the platform stance allows you to equal your weight more onto both of your legs, and the back foot can assist a little bit more. In the case of the narrow platform stance, I want to explain something unique that happens in this sequence. With the other stances, at the full load position, the knees and ankles look bent, but from there, the torso looks relatively straight. However, if you look at Roddick, who arguably has the best narrow platform stance serve, you'll see that he has his hip flexors bent or stretched too. This adds a whole nother element, a major muscle group, into contributing for a powerful leg drive. How much force you can generate with your leg drive also depends on how well you utilize the stretch and shortening cycle in your muscles. Basically, when you bend your legs, the muscles that will drive your body up, like your quads and calves, are stretched. From this position, for a short amount of time, you'll be able to push the ground with more force due to properties like elastic energy that's stored in your tendons. But if you stay in this position a second too long, you'll quickly lose this ability and therefore push the ground with less force. In most cases, good servers using any sort of platform stance are going to have a relatively quick loading and unloading action in their legs. But for players using the pinpoint stance, a common tendency is actually to finish bending the front leg before starting to move the back foot up. This will cause the player to stay in their knee bend for too long and lose a lot of potential force from the leg drive. So which one produces the most force? In terms of the total force you can generate, the narrow platform stance is the clear winner here, since you can use the most muscle to drive up and do it as quickly as possible, while the pinpoint stance is susceptible to technical flaws that lead to a poor leg drive. According to Simon from Top Tennis Training, this immense force from the legs is one of the biggest reasons why Roddick was able to serve so fast without getting his shoulder and elbow tired or injured. Now let's take this into phase 2, how effectively you can convert the leg drive into racket head speed. The further away you can shift your center of gravity from where your leg drive occurs, the more racket head speed you can ultimately create. First, when you shift your weight forward onto your front leg, what you might notice is that your left hip will lead if you're a righty. You might even feel some stretch in your hip. As you begin your forward swing, you'll be able to transfer this hip extension into power by flexing your trunk forward. The more you can shift your weight forward without losing balance completely, the more power you can generate on your serve. Out of the 3 stances, the pinpoint stance will allow you to shift out the furthest. The narrow platform stance comes in second, and you'll be the most limited with the wide platform stance because of the positioning of the back foot. The second way to offset your center of gravity is by tilting your torso as you bend your legs. As you straighten your legs, this tilt will naturally turn into trunk extension, which will allow your racket to reach a deeper racket drop and give you more ability to flex your trunk forward with power. For the pinpoint stance and wide platform stance, this backward tilt will happen naturally as you bend your knees. But for the narrow platform stance, you can see in players like Roddick that this tilt is minimal and will ultimately lead to less trunk extension as the legs drive up. The last element that generates racket head speed is body rotation. Just like on the forehand, rotating your hips and shoulders away from the ball when you're loading and uncoiling them back into the ball during the forward swing is a key source of power on the serve. Both the platform stance and the pinpoint stance allow the trunk to rotate back, but for several reasons it's harder to do so with the pinpoint stance. First, because you're moving the back foot up. Countering this moving by rotating back will feel forced and unnatural to many players. Also, a common tendency for players on the WTA is to bring their back foot into an open stance. This is bad because it automatically blocks the amount of rotation that you can get away from the baseline. In fact, this might encourage you to start turning back into the ball prematurely, which can lead to inconsistency. Now, if you have this problem, don't worry. With enough work, you can easily solve this. If you take your back foot and point it even more back, you can get a greater hip and shoulder turn away from the ball. Now, as this stance would be a little bit more advanced, I would say 4.0 and up, I would suggest that you stick to the regular stance unless you have enough flexibility, strength, and coordination with that type of serve. So now that we've uncovered all this data, which stance contributes to the most power on your serve? To get an idea, let's take a look at the fastest recorded serves on the ATP leaderboard. As of 2018, there are a few players using the platform stance, but the majority of the rest have the pinpoint stance. The narrow platform stance allows for an explosive drive, and if you have an exceptionally strong, flexible shoulder like Roddick, this is a viable option for a powerful serve. At the end of the day, the radically less balanced pinpoint stance allows for a more extreme weight shift, backward tilt, and sufficient leg drive, and when done correctly, it could lead to the most powerful and explosive serve. Besides the proper serve mechanics and fundamentals that we'll cover in another video, when it comes to your stance, there are two factors that determine how much consistency you'll have: your balance and how complex your motion is. The wide platform stance will give you the most balance because you have a wider base of support. This will allow you to control when and where you launch in correlation to the rest of your stroke. In a pinpoint stance, you'll have more force going into the serve, but at the same time, your motion will require more dynamic balance, and if it's not timed perfectly, you could easily make an error. This is why at the highest level, while players like Federer and Raonic are known for their power in their serve, they're also known for their excellent placement and accuracy and tactical use of the ball. The added complexity of moving your back foot up also requires you to spread your brain power to more aspects of your body. Instead of just focusing on timing the backswing with your turn and your knee bend, you have to focus on bringing your back foot up as well. And when it comes to a complex motion like your serve, even the tiniest differences like your foot positioning can result in whether or not you hit a clean shot. For these reasons, the wide platform stance is arguably the best stance for consistency, while the narrow stance comes in second and the pinpoint is last. If you're just learning how to serve, the wide conservative platform stance is probably the best stance for you, where you only have to focus on positioning your feet about shoulder width with your back foot almost parallel to the baseline. This stance is the simplest and easy to use and will allow you to get the proper knee bend and turn that you need to hit with power. Once you start to develop a solid serve, then you can start experimenting with your stances and start tweaking it to the one that best suits you. Of course, with that, there are potential errors because of the added complexity of moving your back foot up. While this may be a liability to your game in the short run, if you're willing to spend the time and effort to perfecting this stance, this can give you a lot of benefits. If you want a simpler stance that's more versatile and gives you control and accuracy, then the wide platform stance is the best one for you. With this stance, you can experiment with your back foot, pointing it even further back to get more hip and trunk rotation to add more power to your serve. And lastly, if you want something in between without having the complexity of moving the back foot up, but also being able to generate more power than the wide platform stance, the narrow platform stance is your best bet. So that's a wrap for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and let us know in the comments below, what do you want to learn the most about the serve? We'll be sure to cover it in a future video. And remember, if you want to seriously improve your tennis game, be sure to check out our RacquetFlex VIP coaching by clicking the link below. Now go out and train hard. See you in the next video.